Welcome everyone to another episode of Fate Grand Order Servant War Room. This is Gille, and I'll be discussing how your favorite servants would handle an actual Holy Grail War. Because you never know, maybe one day you're walking down the street and BAM! Tentacles. Tentacles everywhere! That's right, for this video I'll be talking about the greatest cool, the psychopathic pedophile that worships pretty much every John and Saber face alike, Gilles de Rais. Gilles de Rais is a 3-star caster servant in FGO. He plays the role of an AoE damage dealer. However, his numbers aren't very impressive, nor are his skills, leading him to being pretty much a subpar servant to use. Gilles de Rais is a pretty iconic character in the Fate franchise, first appearing in Fate Zero as the first antagonist in the story. He also takes an important role in FGO, as it's his entire actions that result in the chaos in Orleans Singularity, as well as the creation of one of the most popular servants, John Alter. No matter where Gilles appears, he seems to take the role of a secondary enemy that has to be defeated before the true enemy. But how would he handle a Holy Grail War? Oh boy, where do I even begin with this one? Gilles de Rais' personality is quite horrific. He's a sociopathic killer with a special interest for children. However, I would like to play the devil's advocate here. While Gilles de Rais is definitely a horrible person, I actually believe that his actions in Fate Zero, where he would kidnap and torture children, was mostly led by his master. While Gilles did kill and torment children, the one doing the actual kidnapping and torture was the master and not Gilles. What I'm trying to say here is that while Gilles might be a sociopathic killer, it's his master in Fate Zero that was truly the monster that was enabling and allowing Gilles to do his actions. Even when Gilles wanted to just give up and stop, it was his master's speech that made Gilles motivated again to continue his actions. So I do believe that while Gilles might be difficult to work from a moral standpoint, he's actually not as uncontrollable as one might believe. While he obviously pairs best with sociopaths and psychopaths, people with high morals will also pair well with him, as Gilles will mostly agree with them that he's horrible. If you prove to be specially good-natured, like Fujimaru, Gilles might even take an interest in you, as he believes that just by working together, it will cause God to also judge you as evil. So, while not the most pleasant servant to summon, he's not the hardest to control, especially if you agree to help him in granting his wish to resurrect John. Just be sure to never put yourself in the way of his dream. While he will compromise and stop certain behaviors if he feels that you are actively trying to get him killed, he might turn against you. Gilles de Rais' stats are pretty bad, but since he's a caster, they're not that relevant. Just be aware that just because he has lower stats doesn't mean that you could beat him in a fight. Gilles was still able to crush a child's skull with a single hand. He has 4 skills, a pretty low number for a caster, and they're all in the misc type, in that they don't have a very clear focus. Gilles has Territory Creation rank B. It's a skill that allows casters to set up a base. At this rank, Gilles can set up a pretty big workshop and can have it well defended against non-servant intruders. Appreciation of the Arts rank E. It's a really obscure skill that allows its user to be able to tell a noble phantom's name at a glance if it has artistic qualities. But its rank is so low that despite having this skill, I don't believe Gilles has ever been able to tell a noble phantom's name before it's revealed, making this skill pretty much non-existent. Mental Pollution rank A. Now this is a pretty useful skill, although it does come with a drawback. It essentially blocks outside interference by having one's mind being so screwed over that whatever an enemy might try to do is just negated. Basically put, Gilles is so insane that even mind control doesn't work on him. And his last skill, Evil Eye of the Abyss, rank C. This skill represents the downward spiral that Gilles' life went after John's death, where in order to fill the emptiness he looked into the abyss for guidance. Gilles naturally inflicts fear on others by his appearance alone, so both allies and enemies will feel nervous by having Gilles around, as they will instinctively fear him due to his connection with the abyss. Gilles de Rais only has one noble phantom, but it's quite a doozy one. Prolati's Spellbook. It's a spellbook given to Gilles by Prolati, an Italian cleric that helped Gilles financially and dragged him into the occult. The spellbook is a pretty powerful noble phantom that can turn Gilles, who has no magus in training, into a summoning master capable of performing feats that not even 10 elite magus combined could do. Gilles can teleport, prevent people from dying from fatal wounds, give objects enchantment-like effects such as hypnosis, among other things. However, the book's true power comes from its summoning aspects. Gilles is capable of summoning sea-star-like monsters at essentially an infinite rate. All he needs is blood to act as a sacrifice and he can start summoning. He can even use the blood of the monsters as a catalyst, meaning that he only needs a small amount of blood to start, and afterwards he can just keep increasing the numbers of monsters from each of their corpses. The monsters themselves are stronger than humans and can easily crush one, but they're generally no match to a servant. That is, if they are in small numbers, and that's what makes this book truly terrifying. Gilles does not use his own magical energy to summon, and instead the book itself is the supply of the energy, having practically an infinite supply, meaning that so long as Gilles wants, the army of monsters will never stop coming. When both Saber and Lancer were fighting Caster in Fate Zero, each killed 500 of these monsters, and yet the tidal wave of monsters never stopped. This shows how ridiculous this noble phantom is, as no matter how strong a servant is, if they lack a method to easily clear the way towards Gilles, the horde of monsters is endless and will eventually overwhelm enemies. That said, the book is constantly maintaining the monsters, so any disruptions such as Rule Breaker or Gille hitting the book, all monsters summoned by the book will die as they lost the connection to the book. But don't think that damaging the book will stop it. The book is practically a living organism capable of repairing itself instantly. The only reason Rule Breaker and Gille would work is because of their magic disruption capabilities. Finally, we have to talk about the big one. The big monster, the god, that Gilles can summon.
見捨てられたる者は集うがいい。私が率いる。私が滑る。我ら貶められたる者たちの怨嗟は必ずや神にも届く。おお、天上の主よ。私は糾弾をもって恩義をたたえよう。傲岸なる神よ。冷酷なる神よ。我らは御座より引きずり下ろす。
Unlike the smaller monsters, which are practically instant to summon, the big one requires several hours to perform, as well as a large water source such as a river or ocean. Gilles will begin summoning his sea star monsters at a large rate, which will then fuse together underneath him. This large monster will then fuse with Gilles, so it's pretty much his final trump card, as once he's fused, there's no way to go back. Once the summoning is complete, the monster will emerge and move towards the largest center of people. This monster is highly dangerous, and pretty much outside of anti-fortifications or higher noble phantoms, it can't be stopped. And when I say it can't be stopped, I don't just mean that other servants can't take it out. I mean, even if you and Gilles die, This monster will continue to exist as long as it can get its tentacles on a food source such as a large population. So yeah, if Gilles ever brings this big boy out, if there's no Artoria or Karna, then that's pretty much game over for the Holy Grail War for everyone. It's a game over for all your enemies, all your allies, and yourself, because this monster is there to stay. So Gilles is the prime example of how a noble phantom makes the servant. His stats are horrible, his skills are irrelevant, but his noble phantom is completely busted. Servant Killer. As I talked about his noble phantom, unless his opponents have some way to quickly clear the way to get to Gilles, Gilles can overwhelm enemies with just numbers, and pretty much any average servant will just get overwhelmed as they have nothing in their arsenal to deal with the number of monsters. Insane. Gilles is not mentally stable. While I do think that he can be reasoned with some smart words, you're still talking with a loose cannon, and while he might agree at first to compromise, there's no telling what he might do behind your back. Easy to manipulate. Gilles has one objective for the Grail, and that is to revive Jeanne. That means that so long as you agree to help him with that objective, he should stay relatively cooperative. Weak to Saber and Jeanne faces. You better hope that there aren't any Saber or Jeanne faces in that war, or Gilles will become heavily erratic, especially when the Saber or Jeanne face reject him. If that were to happen, it's very likely that Gilles will become unpredictable and any attempts to calm him down may have disastrous results. Weak to Virtue. Surprisingly, good-natured people such as Jeanne or Fujimaru will have an easier time controlling Gilles. Despite Gilles being insane, he is self-aware of how horrible he is, and having a master trying to save him, quote-unquote, and keeping him on the right path will amuse him enough to not kill you, so long as, of course, you don't get in the way of his wish to revive Jeanne. Lose-lose situation. Unfortunately, whether you win or lose, it's a loss no matter whether you're a sociopath, a psychopath, or a normal person. If Gilles wins, he'll revive Jeanne, which we already know the result thanks to Orleans' singularity. Jeanne Alter will appear and start a genocide against everything. Note that this Jeanne Alter is not the edgy tsundere that we all learned to love. This Jeanne Alter will be the embodiment of self-hatred and vengeance, impossible to reason with, and will only be satisfied when either everything is burned to the ground or she dies. You might even think that it's fine since Gilles will protect you. But you're wrong. Gilles will disappear shortly after his wish is granted, since the Holy Grail War is over, leaving you alone with a very angry, volatile, and murderous Jeanne Alter. Yeah, you're not escaping that. Due to how dangerous Gilles is, I'll do strategies a bit different. Instead of talking on how you can win, I'll focus first on what you can do to not die. Keep a command spell until the end and order Gilles to commit suicide once all your enemies are gone. I will recommend that you do this at a safe distance and particularly in a location that Gilles has never been to. That way, Gilles can't revenge kill you in his last moments. Even if you're a sociopath or a psychopath, letting Gilles get his wish will only result in you having a miserable death at the hands of Jeanne Alter. So unless you've gained a deep friendship with Gilles, just kill him at the end. Force him to commit suicide if he's too much for you. If you find that you can't control him or that he's driving you insane, it might be best to just concede the Holy Grail War. Again, go to a location Gilles has never been to and order his suicide at a safe distance. Then head to the local church and inform them of your resignation from the war. You might have lost the war, but at least you didn't lose your life or your sanity. Use the end goal as a way to keep Gilles under control. Gilles' only wish is to revive Jeanne, so use that as a way to manipulate him into doing what you want. As I've mentioned many times, I believe Gilles can be easily controllable to not do acts of evil. However, having extra reinforcement to keep him in line is always good. Also, never let him summon his big guy. If that big monster ever reaches land, that is an actual game over for everyone. Even ordering caster to commit suicide will not stop the monster from continuing its rampage. Now that I've talked about strategies to not lose, how about winning? Well, for starters, gathering information is important. Gille's method of winning is by overwhelming the enemy with numbers. So Gilles should avoid powerful enemies with consistent anti-army attacks, such as riders with their mounts. Turtling your way to victory is a good option, but you'll need to find a hobby for Gilles to make sure he doesn't get bored and starts doing crazy stuff. Using the goal of John and the concept of staying low to Gilles should calm him down. But I would also maybe see if there's any hobby in the real world that might interest him, such as collecting or making figurines. That way he can make as many figurines of John as he wants while he watches over the war. If there's a John lookalike, unfortunately there's not much you can do. Gilles will become erratic and unpredictable. The only option available might be to kill Gilles at that point. Targeting the masters is also a viable option. Gilles' book makes him several times more powerful than your average magus, so Gilles can easily invade an enemy's base and either kill or kidnap the enemy master while the enemy servant is away or busy dealing with the endless horde of monsters. As for what you do to the master, there's a lot of options at your disposal. You can just kill them and wait for the enemy servant to disappear. That would probably be the safest bet. However, if you're feeling daring, you could potentially have Gilles mentally destroy the master and turn them into a puppet-like person that you can then use as a way to control another servant. As for combat, there's not much you can do. Gilles will either overwhelm the enemy with numbers or the enemy will be able to clear the monsters away. That's the only saying Gilles can do in combat. Gilles de Rais is a serious threat in any war, not only because if he lands on the wrong hands, mass murders and disappearance will start all over the city, but also because depending on who's summoned, Gilles will either be calm or very erratic throughout the war. He's also very difficult to control, but not impossible if you really try to control him. I originally wanted to give him an E, since I thought that unless you're a sociopath that he would kill you on the spot. But putting a bit more thought into it, that's likely not going to happen unless you're an idiot and start confronting Gilles for no legit reason. So I'll give him a B. Gilles' book is simply too ridiculous, and even in a war full of powerful servants, Gilles is a threat that needs to be taken out. If you're able to control him and keep him from doing crazy stuff, Gilles can easily stay out of radar and then suddenly surprise all enemies with just how powerful he is with his summons. That said, I can't put him any higher, as most people will find Gilles impossible to work with on principle. But if you're like me, who's willing to give Gilles a shot, then you might find Gilles to be easy to talk with. Again, given a John face doesn't show up. Worst case scenario, you'll order Gilles to commit suicide while you're in a safe area. You'll lose a war, but not your life. And that was Gilles de Rais. Wait. What's that sound?
Saint War Order!
That's right, you thought we were done, but no, there's more. So far, we talked about the caster version, but Gilles also has his Saber version. While most times, Gilles will only be summoned as a caster, there's a potential to summon him as a Saber, such as having a catalyst related to him when the caster class is already taken. So, how would Gilles' Saber class fare in a real Holy Grail War? Saber Gilles is a lot calmer and normal than caster version, as his Saber version is supposed to be Gilles before he looked into the abyss. However, he will be melancholic and depressive, and John will remain a touchy subject for him. But overall, most people should not have an issue with his Saber version. Saber Gilles' stats are pretty average for a Saber. His strength is good, but his endurance and agility are on the average side, making him pretty average as far as stats goes. It's important to note that even if his stats are average, Saber Gilles is a knight, meaning that he was trained in combat and has experience fighting. So he'll still hold his ground well against servants like Asterios who have higher stats but are not competent fighters. As for his skills, Saber Gilles has 6 skills in total, a real good upgrade to his 4 skills as a caster. His skills can be divided as support, defensive, and misc. For support skills, Saber Gilles has Tactics rank C. It's a support skill that only activates when Gilles is leading a group of many. Not very usable in a Holy Grail War. Regardless, when Gilles is mounting an offensive assault, he and his army will receive a boost to their stats. He has Prolati's Encouragement rank B. It's a self-buffing skill that Gilles has to purposely activate. Using Magecraft, he increases his strength by 1 rank. Doing so will cause him to awaken memories of when he became the monster that tortured and abused children. For defensive skills, Saber Gilles has Magic Resistance rank B, a pretty high rank all things considered. At this rank, Saber Gilles can even resist high-tier Magecraft thrown at him. Pretty impressive. And finally, his misc skills, which is where most of his skills land. He has Riding rank B. It's an okay skill that allows its owner to be able to mount most animals and vehicles without issue. At this rank, Gilles could even ride a plane without issue, even though it would be his first time seeing one. He has Golden Rule rank B. It's a pretty useful skill for the daily life, but are useless in combat. Basically, Gilles will never have issues with money, and money will always find a way to his hands if he ever needs some. And finally, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Mad Enhancement rank EX. That's right, Saber Gilles has the Berserker unique skill Mad Enhancement. However, no matter where I look, Gilles might as well not even have it. Saber Gilles is not insane. Saber Gilles does not receive stat bonuses that Mad Enhancement should provide. In other words, Saber Gilles has the skill for no reason as it's not active at all. So despite having Mad Enhancement, you might as well treat him as if he doesn't have it, as no matter how you look at him, he doesn't show any behavior that a Berserker normally would. And finally, Saber Gilles has 2 Noble Phantoms, again an upgrade to his only Noble Phantom as a caster. Saint War Order. It's his first Noble Phantom and it's a self-buffing type Noble Phantom. Saber Gilles returns to his prime when he fought under John's banner, receiving a rank up to all his stats, as well as a Mad Enhancement like debuff, where he continues to fight his enemy until they either die or Gilles dies. One thing to note is that with Saint War Order, Gilles' stat become comparable to Artoria's own, and that if he also activates his skill Prolati's Encouragement, his strength skill becomes comparable to Hercules. Like what? He goes from average to a living BT sick. Anyway, it's a pretty neat trick and can definitely catch people off guard, especially in rematches. Imagine Gilles having already fought an enemy, fight the same enemy a second time, but used Saint War Order before the fight. The enemy will be completely caught off guard by the increase in power and might even die because they thought they could block an attack that only ends up slicing them in half. But Gilles has a second Noble Phantom, so what could this Noble Phantom be? Why, it's the overpowered book again, of course. Wait, what? You're telling me that Saber Gilles can also summon new monsters? Doesn't that make him strictly a better version to his caster Gilles? Well, yes and no. Saber Gilles can't actually use the book like caster version can. Instead, if Saber Gilles uses the book, he will immediately turn to his caster version permanently, losing his Saint War Order, his Saber skills, and changing his stats. So yeah, Saber Gilles can just turn into caster version at will, which of course the book can then be used as normal. Overall, Saber Gilles comes through as a less powerful Gilles, but as a more competent version as a fighter. While not having the power the caster version has, he can work as a beating stick type servant that overpowers weaker enemies by having better stats. And in Holy Grails with tougher opponents, you can always have him switch to his caster version. Easier to work with. Compared to his caster version, Saber Gilles is a lot easier to work with and to befriend. Beat stick. Saber Gilles doesn't have many options. He has high stats thanks to his Noble Phantom, and that's that. So he will either beat his opponent to a pulp, or he will be beaten to a pulp. Strictly better than his caster version. Saber Gilles is by far better than his caster version. For only one reason. He can easily be befriended in his Saber version. And then when he turns into his caster version, he'll keep all his memories and good times he had with you, making him a lot easier to control than if you had just summoned him as a caster. No sabers to deal with. Saber Gilles is a saber that can turn to a caster. So not only do you get rid of the highest counter to casters in general, you also got rid of a class that generally have powerful anti-armies or higher Noble Phantoms, making his caster version much a safer bet when he transforms. Playing the long game is advised. Try to have Saber Gilles have simple and quick matches against enemy servants just to size each other up. Then when a rematch is bound to happen, have Saber Gilles use Saint War Order preemptively before encountering the enemy. That way he can catch the enemy by surprise with his increased stats, and might even manage a surprise kill. Avoid servants like Artoria that have high stats and are well trained, and instead go after servants that are either weak like casters and assassins, or strong but not competent fighters like Asterios. Saber Gilles' stats and fighting prowess should land him a kill here and there. However, against more powerful enemies, your only option is probably going to be to have him transform into caster. And that leads to another problem. Does Saber Gilles want to transform into caster? While it's not stated anywhere whether he would or not transform willingly, we can assume that he wouldn't want to transform into caster due to it being a traumatic experience. In other words, you would likely have to use a command seal to have him transform, which wouldn't be a smart choice since he would likely kill you in return for forcing him to transform something he didn't want to. So what can you do in that respect? Become Gilles' friend. Make him want to protect you at all costs. In a tight situation, he might be willing to transform if that means he can save you. Afterwards, you'll be in a better situation than if you had summoned caster Gilles from the get-go. Not only do you have no sabers to deal with, but caster Gilles will retain his memories from before, remaining your friend and being much simpler to control. You would still need to have him commit suicide at the end to prevent you and Alter from being revived, but at least you wouldn't have to worry about Gilles stabbing you in the back. Overall, Saber Gilles is a much better version than caster Gilles, since it's essentially the same caster Gilles but with an easier personality for most people to handle with in the beginning. So I'll give him a rank B. While much easier to control than the caster version, you'll still need to find a way to get him to transform willingly, which will take a lot of effort. But if you manage to do it, you essentially have an easier to control caster Gilles. And that was Gilles de Rais. Both versions. 2 in 1. That's why this video is bigger. Anyway, this was actually quite interesting, especially the Saber part. Caster Gilles, I kind of already knew that he would be a pretty good servant to get, aside from obviously the murdering children part, but I do actually believe that you can somewhat restrain him in that aspect if you put some rules, given of course you also find ways to entertain him, such as, for example, you know, there's a lot of modern hobbies that I'm sure caster Gilles would find entertaining, such as, for example, creating figures like Medea did with Saber. But the Saber version, now that was a surprise. I was not expecting to find that Saber Gilles could just turn into caster Gilles. It's like, wow, you're in the middle of a Holy Grail War, you're expecting to find a Saber, and no, 2 casters now. Lovely. But yeah, that was pretty fun. Overall, this video was interesting to make. Very long. A lot of headaches. My computer did not enjoy making this video, but here we are. And give me any. If you really want to look at a servant, comment down below. I do look at the comments, even if you're not seeing videos of the servants that you want me to do. I do look at the comments. It's just that I do already somewhat have kind of a list of servants that I want to go at, and Gilles was the one that I was looking forward the most after Leonidas. So please continue to give suggestions down below. I do look at them. They are in my list to do, and I am ordering them so that I can put them out quicker than normal. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video and my content, please leave a like, subscribe, and hey, give a comment. Till next time, bye.